At the will reading, my billionaire grandfather left everyone millions of dollars. My father got the multi-billion-dollar corporation. My brother got the real estate portfolio and 12 supercars. My sister-in-law got $5 million in vintage diamonds. And me, I got a single, dirty, crumpled $20 bill. My brother laughed so hard he choked on his sparkling water. My sister-in-law whispered that it was enough to buy a box of tampons. They thought it was the ultimate insult from the grave. They did not know that $20 bill was worth more than everything they had just inherited combined, because they did not check the serial number. My name is Jasmine Vance, and at 32 years old, I am the only person in my family who actually works for a living. Before I tell you how that $20 bill destroyed my arrogant family, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you... Now let me take you back to the moment my life changed forever. The conference room at Sterling & Associates smelled like old money and furniture polish. It was freezing cold. Or maybe that was just the ice coming from my father, Reginald, sitting across from me. I sat in the corner of the room, trying to make myself as small as possible in the oversized leather chair. I pulled the sleeves of my wool cardigan down to cover the frayed threads at my wrist. Across the mahogany table, my brother Preston was checking his reflection in his Patek Philippe watch, while his wife Ashley picked lint off her Chanel skirt. Ashley caught me looking at her and offered a tight, pitying smile. She leaned over to Preston and whispered loud enough for me to hear. "I told you she would wear that sweater. It smells like a public school classroom." Preston snickered and adjusted his silk tie. I said nothing. I was used to this. In the Vance family, your worth was determined by your net worth, and my salary as a high school history teacher barely covered my rent. Reginald cleared his throat, loudly tapping his manicured fingers on the table. "Lawyer James, can we wrap this up? I have a board meeting at 3, and I do not want to be late to take my rightful place as chairman." Lawyer James, a man who had served my grandfather Elijah for 40 years, looked over his reading glasses. His eyes were sad as they settled on me. He opened the thick leather binder. "We are here to honor the last wishes of Elijah Vance." The room went silent. Lawyer James began to read. "To my son, Reginald Vance, I leave the controlling interest in Vance Industries, valued at $2.4 billion. My father did not even smile. He just nodded, as if he were accepting a delivery he had ordered months ago. "It is about time," he muttered. "To my grandson, Preston Vance, I leave my commercial real estate holdings in downtown Chicago and my personal collection of 12 vintage automobiles." Preston jumped up and pumped his fist in the air. "Yes, the Aston Martin is mine." He grabbed Ashley and kissed her cheek. "We are getting that yacht, baby." To Ashley Vance. Lawyer James continued, his voice devoid of emotion. "I leave the Eleanor Diamond collection." Ashley gasped, clutching her chest theatrically. "Oh, I knew he loved me." She smirked at me. "Real diamonds, Jasmine, not the glass kind you wear." My heart hammered against my ribs. I did not want their money. I did not want the company or the cars. I just wanted the small lake house where Grandpa and I used to fish on Sundays. It was the only place I had ever felt safe. It was the only place where I was not judged for being plain or bookish or unambitious. And finally, Lawyer James said, the room seemed to suck in all the air. Reginald leaned back, crossing his arms. "Let us hear it." Probably left her his library of dusty books. Lawyer James reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single, thin, cream-colored envelope. He slid it across the long polished table. It stopped right in front of me. There were no keys inside, no deed to a house, no check. It was light as a feather. My hands shook as I picked it up. I could feel their eyes burning into me. Preston had his phone out recording. "Open it, Jasmine," he taunted. "Maybe it is a gift card to Applebee's." I tore the seal. I reached inside. My fingers brushed against paper. I pulled it out. It was a $20 bill. Just one. It was old and soft from use, with a deep crease down the middle like it had been folded in a pocket for years. For a second, there was absolute silence. Then Preston exploded with laughter. He laughed so hard he doubled over, slapping the table. $20! That is hilarious. He threw us billions and gave you lunch money? Ashley covered her mouth, giggling uncontrollably. Oh, honey, that is tragic. But look on the bright side. It is just enough to buy a box of tampons. You know, for your time of the month. Or maybe some cheap cat food for when you end up alone. My face burned. I felt tears pricking the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I looked at my father, hoping for a shred of defense, hoping he would tell them to stop. Reginald looked at the $20 bill and then looked at me with pure disgust. "He knew," he said coldly. "Even in death, he knew. He knew you were not cut out for greatness, Jasmine. You are a teacher. You are small. You think small. $20 is exactly what you are worth to this dynasty." He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "Come on, Preston, Ashley, let us go to the Palm. I am craving lobster to celebrate." Reginald looked at me one last time. "We would invite you, Jasmine, but, well, $20 won't cover the valet parking, let alone the appetizer. Enjoy your inheritance." They swept out of the room, leaving a wake of expensive cologne and cruelty. Preston turned back at the door, still recording. "Don't spend it all in one place, sis." I was alone with Lawyer James. He looked down at his papers, unable to meet my eye. "I am sorry, Jasmine. He insisted on this." I looked down at the bill in my hand. I wanted to crumble it up. I wanted to tear it into tiny pieces and scream. How could Grandpa do this? He was my best friend. He was the one who paid for my teaching degree when Dad refused. He was the one who told me that knowledge was power. Was this his final lesson? That I was worthless? I was about to crush the bill in my fist when the light from the chandelier hit the paper. I froze. There was writing on it. In the bottom corner, in tiny purple ink, the kind of ink Grandpa always used for his journal, was a message. "Value is not found in the numbers, Jasmine. It is found where others refuse to look." My thumb brushed over the serial number. I frowned. A normal $20 bill has a random string of numbers, but this one was different. I brought it closer to my eyes. The letters and numbers were perfectly arranged. E-1990-LEGACY. Legacy. Elijah, 1990. Legacy. A chill shot down my spine. 1990 was the year I was born. Grandpa didn't leave me $20. He left me a message. He left me a key. My breathing quickened. The Vance family motto was always, "Look at the bottom line." But Grandpa always told me, "Look at the fine print." I looked up at Lawyer James. "Does my father know about the serial number?" I stood up and smoothed my cardigan. "Thank you, James. I walked out of the plush office and took the elevator down to the parking garage. It had started to rain, a cold, gray Chicago drizzle that soaked through my clothes instantly. I walked past the spot where my father's limo and Preston's Porsche had been parked. They were gone, off to eat lobster and drink champagne and toast to their victory. I walked to the far corner of the lot to my 10-year-old Honda Civic. The bumper was held on by duct tape, and the paint was peeling. I got in and turned the key. The engine sputtered and died. I tried again. Nothing. Just the clicking sound of a dead battery. I sat there in the cold silence of my car, rain streaking down the windshield, blurring the city lights. I should have been crying. I should have been devastated. My family had just cut me out, disowned me, and humiliated me for the entire world to see. I felt dangerous. My father said I was worth $20. He was right. But he forgot that a $20 bill can buy a lot of things. It can buy a hammer to break glass. It can buy a match to start a fire. Or in my case, it could buy the end of the Vance empire. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the private client services at the Swiss Heritage Bank. It was a number Grandpa had made me memorize when I was 10 years old, telling me never to call it unless I was holding the legacy bill. The line rang once. A woman answered, her voice crisp and professional. Swiss Heritage Bank, how may I direct your call? I took a deep breath. My name is Jasmine Vance. I am holding serial number E1990 Legacy. There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. Then the woman's voice changed. It dropped to a whisper, trembling with something that sounded. I looked out at the rain and smiled. Enjoy your lobster, Dad, because it is going to be your last expensive meal. The rain had not stopped since the will reading. It battered the windows of my small one-bedroom apartment in the West Loop, creating a rhythm that matched the pounding headache behind my eyes. I had barely slept, tossing and turning on the couch, clutching that old $20 bill like a lifeline. I kept waiting for the sadness to hit me. I kept waiting to mourn the grandfather who had been my only ally in a den of vipers. But sadness requires safety, and I did not feel safe. I felt like a soldier waiting for the enemy to breach the gates. At exactly 7 a.m, the enemy arrived. It did not start with a polite knock. It started with the sound of a key card sliding into my electronic lock, followed by the heavy thud of boots on my hardwood floor. I jumped up from the couch, my heart hammering against my ribs. 3 men in black tactical uniforms stormed into my living room. They were not police. They were private security. The Vance Industries private security. "Hey, what are you doing? Get out of my house!" I shouted, grabbing a throw blanket to cover my pajamas. The men ignored me completely. They began pulling paintings off the walls and sweeping my knickknacks into large black trash bags. Behind them, the door opened wide, and Ashley strolled in. She was wearing a white cashmere tracksuit that probably cost more than my annual teaching salary. She held a steaming pumpkin spice latte in one hand and her phone in the other, filming the chaos with a bored expression. "Good morning, Sleeping Beauty," she chirped, taking a sip of her coffee. "You might want to get dressed. The movers will be here in 10 minutes to take the furniture." "Ashley, what is going on?" I demanded, stepping over a pile of my own clothes that a guard had just dumped on the floor. "This is my apartment!" "Grandpa gave me this apartment." Ashley laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Correction, sweetie. Grandpa let you stay in a corporate housing unit owned by Vance Industries. But now that Reginald is CEO and Preston is head of real estate, they are liquidating non-essential assets." She looked around my cozy living room with a sneer. And let us be honest, Jasmine. You are a non-essential asset. Preston wants to buy a new yacht by the weekend, and we need the cash flow. So this place goes on the market at noon. You cannot do this, I said, my voice trembling with rage. By law, I have 30 days. Ashley stepped closer into my personal space. Her perfume was overpowering, sickly sweet and expensive. By law, you are a squatter in company housing. Daddy signed an emergency eviction order an hour ago, citing renovation needs. You have 2 hours to clear out your personal trash. Hey, grab that box on the table. No! I screamed, lunging forward. That box contained my lesson plans, 10 years of history curriculums, student letters, and my teaching awards. It was my life's work. The guard ignored me. He grabbed the box and dumped it upside down. Papers flew everywhere, fluttering like dying birds. Ashley kicked a stack of my graded essays with her pristine white sneaker. Look at this junk, she scoffed. History books, lesson plans. God, Jasmine, no wonder you are so poor. You spend your life looking at the past while we are building the future. Get this fire hazard out of here. I dropped to my knees, frantically trying to gather my papers. My hands were shaking. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to claw that smug look off her face. But then I heard Grandpa's voice in my head, clear as a bell. Tears are for the weak, Jasmine. Strategy is for the strong. When they corner you, do not cower. Go to Sterling. I looked at the mess on the floor. My life, my passion, treated like garbage by people who had never worked a day in their lives. Slowly, I stood up. I wiped my hands on my pajama pants. I looked Ashley dead in the eye. You are right, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It is just paper. Ashley blinked, surprised by my lack of tears. She looked disappointed. She wanted a show. She wanted me to beg. I walked into the bedroom, ignoring the guards who were dismantling my bed. I changed into jeans and a hoodie. I grabbed my backpack and shoved the $20 bill deep into the inner pocket. I did not pack clothes. I did not pack shoes. I just walked to the door. Leaving so soon, Ashley called out, mocking me. You still have an hour before we change the locks. Do not forget your box of tampons. I hear they are expensive. I did not look back. I walked out into the cold rain. I had no car. I walked for 40 minutes to the financial district. The rain soaked through my hoodie, plastering my hair to my face. Mud splashed onto my jeans from passing taxis. I looked like a homeless person. I looked like exactly what my family thought I was. Nothing. I stood in front of the Swiss Heritage Bank. It was a fortress of glass and steel, intimidating and cold. This was where the ultra-wealthy hid their secrets. People like my father, people like Preston, and now me. I pushed through the revolving doors. The lobby was silent, smelling of marble and money. A security guard twice my size stepped in front of me immediately, his hand resting on his belt. "Excuse me, miss," he rumbled, his eyes scanning my wet clothes and muddy shoes. "The delivery entrance is around back. We do not allow panhandling in the lobby." "I am not a delivery girl," I said, pushing wet hair out of my eyes. "And I am not begging. I am here to see Director Sterling." The guard let out a dry laugh. Director Sterling. "Do you have an appointment?" "Look, miss, you need to leave before I call the police. You are dripping on the Italian marble." He reached out to grab my arm. His grip was tight. I was about to be thrown out onto the street again, humiliated again. "Wait," I said, reaching into my pocket. My hand closed around the damp paper. I have this. I pulled out the $20 bill. It looked pathetic in the grand lobby. Small, dirty, wrinkled. The guard stared at it and then sighed. Is this a joke? You want to deposit $20. Go to the ATM outside. Now get out. He began to drag me towards the door. I dug my heels in. Check the serial number, I shouted, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. Just check the damn number! The commotion drew the attention of the tellers. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, walked over. What is the problem here? She says she needs to see Director Sterling. The guard grunted, still holding my arm. She is waving around a $20 bill like it is a golden ticket. The teller looked at me, then at the bill in my hand. Let me see it. I handed it to her. She smoothed it out. She read the numbers. E1990 Legacy. Her eyes went wide. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. She looked at me with a mixture of terror and awe. She did not speak. She simply turned around and ran towards a heavy oak door behind the counter marked private. What is going on? The guard asked, loosening his grip slightly. 2 minutes later, the heavy oak door burst open. A man in an immaculate three-piece suit came running out. He was older, with silver hair and the bearing of a man who controlled empires. It was Arthur Sterling, the most powerful banker in Chicago, and he was running. He skidded to a stop in front of me. Sir, I was just removing. You were removing the most important client this bank has ever had, Mr. Sterling snapped. He turned to me. He did not look at my muddy shoes. He did not look at my wet hair. He looked me in the eye with absolute respect. He slowly lowered his head, bowing 90 degrees in front of everyone in the lobby. Miss Vance, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. We have been waiting for this day for 10 years. Your grandfather left strict instructions. He straightened up and gestured towards the private offices. Please follow me. It is time for you to take your rightful place. Welcome back, Chairman. Director Sterling led me down a corridor that seemed to go on forever. The air grew cooler with every step, and the plush carpet of the lobby, at each one, Sterling simply nodded, and the heavy steel doors slid open silently. We finally stopped in front of a circular vault door that looked like it belonged in a movie. It was massive, gleaming silver, and intimidating. Sterling turned to me, his expression solemn. Miss Vance, what I am about to show you is known by only 3 people. Your grandfather, myself, and now you. Your father believes he inherited an empire today. He is wrong. He inherited a graveyard. I frowned, confused. What do you mean? Grandpa built Vance Industries from nothing. It is worth billions. Sterling typed a long code into a keypad on the wall. The massive tumblers of the vault began to spin with a deep mechanical groan. On paper, yes, Sterling said. But your grandfather knew something that you suspected for a long time. He knew that your father and brother were not just incompetent. They were thieves. The vault door swung open. Inside, there were no stacks of gold bars or piles of cash. Instead, it was a small room filled with computer servers humming quietly and a single desk with a high-tech workstation. On the desk sat a small glass scanner. Sterling gestured to the scanner. Please place the bill there. I pulled the crumpled $20 bill from my pocket. It felt warm in my hand. I smoothed it out carefully, trying to flatten the crease down the middle. I placed it on the glass. A red laser swept over the paper, scanning the serial number, E1990 1990 Legacy. Suddenly, the room came alive. The wall of screens in front of us flared to life, illuminating the dark room with a blue glow. Columns of numbers and graphs scrolled by at dizzying speeds. Sterling walked over to the screens. "Welcome to the Shadow Trust." He pointed to the first screen, which showed the logo of Vance Industries in bright red. "This is what your father inherited," Sterling explained. "He thinks he owns the asset, but look closer at the liabilities column." I squinted at the numbers. My breath caught in my throat. The debt column was staggering. It was in the billions. "Your father has been leveraging the company for years," Sterling said, his voice dripping with disdain. "He has taken out loan after loan, using the company assets as collateral to fund his lavish lifestyle. And Preston..." Sterling tapped a few keys and a new window popped up. It was a forensic accounting of my brother's spending. "Preston has embezzled over $10 million in the last 18 months alone," Sterling revealed. "He funneled it through shell companies in the Cayman Islands to pay for gambling debts in Macau and bad cryptocurrency investments." My stomach churned. I watched the screen as line after line of theft appeared. "And here is your sister-in-law," Sterling said, bringing up another file. "Ashley is listed as a creative consultant for the firm. Her salary is $500,000 a year." "But look at her expense reports." I read the list. $2 million charged to the company credit card under office supplies. But the vendor names were not office supply stores. They were Hermes, Chanel, Cartier, and private jet charters to St. Bart's. "They hollowed it out," I whispered, realizing the magnitude of the betrayal. "They ate the apple from the inside out and left Grandpa with nothing but the skin." "Precisely," Sterling said. "Your grandfather found out 6 months ago. He was heartbroken. He wanted to fire them all, but he knew that if he did, the scandal would destroy the company's stock and thousands of innocent employees would lose their jobs. So he created a failsafe." Sterling turned to me, his eyes intense. "He created the Shadow Trust. He secretly transferred all the liquid cash, the emergency reserves, and the intellectual property rights into this trust. The company your father holds is a shell. It has no actual money to operate. It cannot pay the electric bill. Unless the Shadow Trust releases the funds." I looked at the screens. The balance of the Shadow Trust was displayed in the center. It was a number with 9 zeros. "You control the oxygen," Jasmine Sterling said softly. "Without this money, Vance Industries suffocates in 48 hours. Your father and brother will be personally liable for the debts they signed for. They will lose everything. The mansions, the cars, the status. They will be destitute." He paused, watching my face. "Your grandfather gave you the veto power. You can sign the authorization right now to cover their debts. You can bail them out. You can let them keep playing pretend billionaires while you go back to your apartment and find a new job. Or," he let the word hang in the air. "Or what?" I asked, my voice stronger than I expected. "Or you can let them fall," Sterling said. "You can activate the audit protocol." I thought about him laughing at me at the funeral. I saw the $2 million Ashley spent on handbags. I thought about her throwing my teaching awards into the trash. I saw my father's signature on the fraudulent loans. I thought about him calling me a disappointment. They did not just steal from the company. They stole from the workers. They stole from Grandpa's legacy, and they tried to steal my dignity. I remembered the rain on my face outside the apartment building. I remembered the feeling of being homeless while they planned to buy a yacht. If I bail them out, they will never learn, I said quietly. They will just keep eating until there is nothing left. I turned to Sterling. The timid history teacher who used to hide in the back of the room was gone. In her place stood the granddaughter of Elijah Vance. "Director Sterling," I said, my voice cold and sharp as a blade, "do not release a single cent." Sterling nodded, a small... "And one more thing," I added, pointing at the screen showing their credit limits. "Initiate the forensic audit immediately. I want every penny they stole documented for the FBI. And while you are doing that, freeze their corporate credit cards, all of them, effective immediately." Sterling typed the command. The screen flashed red. "Protocol activated. Assets frozen." "I want to see what happens when they try to buy their way out of reality," I said. Sterling handed me a sleek black card. "This is the master key to the trust. As of this moment, you are the majority shareholder and the acting chairwoman of the board. You own the building they are sitting in. You own the chairs they are sitting on." I took the card. It felt heavier than the $20 bill, but it felt right. I walked out of the vault, leaving the blue glow of the screens behind me. I walked back through the long corridor, past the security checkpoints. The security guard who had tried to throw me out was standing by the door. He looked nervous as I approached. He rushed to open the door for me, keeping his eyes on the floor. "Have a nice day, Miss Vance," he stammered. I stepped out onto the street. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, and a ray of sunlight hit the wet pavement, making it shine like silver. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from Instagram. Ashley had just posted a photo of a champagne bottle with the caption, "Celebrating our empire." I looked at the photo and smiled. "Drink up, Ashley. It is the last bottle you will ever own." I pulled my hood up and walked toward the subway. I had a lot of work to do. The hunt had just begun. While I was sitting on the hard plastic seat of a subway train watching the city blur past through graffiti-stained windows, my sister-in-law Ashley was stepping into a world that smelled of calfskin leather and old money. The Hermes Boutique on Oak Street was not just a store. It was a temple of exclusivity where the wealthy came to worship themselves. And today, Ashley was ready to be the high priestess. She walked in like she owned the pavement beneath her heels, flanked by her two best friends, Sloane and Muffy. They were the kind of women who lunched on salads that cost $40 and spoke in hushed tones about whose husband was under investigation by the SEC. Ashley was wearing the diamond earrings she had inherited only hours ago. They caught the light of the crystal chandeliers, sending prisms dancing across the silk scarves displayed on the walls. I know this because the store manager Henri told me everything later. But honestly, I did not need to be there to picture it. I knew exactly how Ashley operated. She would have walked straight past the greeter without making eye contact, snapping her fingers for champagne before she even looked at a bag. "Finally, we can breathe," Ashley announced loudly, her voice carrying over the quiet hum of the store. "Sloane, darling, look at this orange. It is divine. I am telling you, the last few years with that old man holding the purse strings were suffocating. Elijah was so cheap he probably washed paper plates." Muffy giggled, sipping the complimentary champagne. "Well, he is gone now, and you are the queen of the castle." Ashley preened, checking her reflection in a mirror. That is right. The queen needs a crown, or in this case, a Birkin. She marched over to the glass display case where the holy grail of handbags sat. It was a Himalayan crocodile Birkin with diamond-encrusted hardware. It cost $80,000. It cost more than my 4 years of college tuition. It cost more than the down payment on a house. To Ashley, it was just a Tuesday afternoon treat. "I will take it," Ashley told the sales associate, a young woman named Sarah who looked terrified. "And bring me those silk scarves." "The ones with the horse print. I will take 5 of them in different colors. Gifts for the maids, you know." Sarah hesitated. "Ma'am, that bag is reserved for our VVIP clients. There is usually a waiting list of 3 years." Ashley laughed, a sharp bark of a sound. "Waiting lists are for people who fly commercial. Do you know who I am? I am Ashley Vance. My husband, Preston Vance, just inherited half of Chicago. I suggest you ring it up before I call your manager and have you fired for incompetence." Sarah swallowed hard and nodded. "Right away, Mrs. Vance." Ashley turned back to her friends, her face flushed with the intoxication of spending money she did not earn. Can you believe Jasmine thought she was getting something? $20. It is poetic justice, really. She never fit in. She was always so glum. So boring. Sloane swirled her glass. "Is she the one who teaches at that public school? The one in the bad neighborhood?" Ashley rolled her eyes. "Yes, she insists on saving." "It is embarrassing. I tried to get her a job at the foundation, just organizing flowers for galas, but she refused. She said she wanted to do real work. Well, now she can really work on finding a cardboard box to live in. We are evicting her today." The 3 of them toasted their glasses, clinking together with a cheerful chime. Sarah returned with the bag packaged in the signature orange box tied with a perfect brown ribbon. "The total comes to $86,400, including tax, Mrs. Vance." Ashley waved her hand dismissively and pulled out the Centurion Black Card. It was the heavy metal card issued to Vance Industries. The card that had no limit. The card that had paid for her plastic surgery, her trips to Bali, and the very shoes on her feet. She slapped it onto the glass counter. "Put it on the corporate account. Mark it as client appreciation gifts." Sarah inserted the chip. The machine beeped. Ashley drummed her manicured fingernails on the glass, humming a little tune. The machine beeped again, a harsh, low tone. Sarah frowned. "I am sorry, Mrs. Vance. It says declined." The air in the boutique seemed to freeze. Sloane and Muffy stopped mid-sip. Ashley's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she let out a forced laugh. "Don't be ridiculous. It is a black card. It does not decline. The chip must be dirty. Try it again." Sarah wiped the card on her blouse and inserted it again. The silence stretched out. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Beep. Declined. Ashley snatched the card back. "That is impossible. Preston just authorized the transfer this morning. Here, try this one." She pulled out a platinum Visa, also linked to the company accounts. Beep. Declined. Please. Muffy took a small step away from her. "There must be a system error," Ashley snapped, her voice rising an octave. "Your machine is broken. Do you know how much money my family has? We could buy this entire building. I have another card. Try this one." She dug frantically into her clutch, pulling out a gold MasterCard. This was her personal allowance card, funded by the Shadow Trust dividends. Sarah tried it. Beep. Declined. Referral code 001. Referral code 001 implies a total freeze due to fraud or theft. Ashley slammed her hand on the counter, making the display case rattle. This is unacceptable. Do you know who I am? I demand to speak to the manager. Get him out here, now! You do not need to shout, Mrs. Vance. The voice was calm and deep, like a cello. Henri, the store manager, stepped out from the back office. He was an elegant man in a tailored suit who had managed this boutique for 20 years. He was also one of the few people Grandpa Elijah trusted to buy gifts for Grandma before she passed. Ashley let out a sigh of relief. Henri, thank God. Your incompetent girl is having trouble with the machine. Tell her to force the transaction through. I am in a hurry. Henri walked behind the counter. He did not look at Sarah. He looked directly at Ashley. His face was impassive, completely unreadable. May I see the card, Mrs. Vance? Ashley handed him the Centurion Black card. See? It is perfectly fine. Just run it manually. Henri held the heavy metal card in his hand. He looked at it. Then he looked at Ashley. I am afraid I cannot do that, Mrs. Vance. Why not? Ashley demanded, hands on her hips. Because this card has been reported stolen. Ashley's jaw dropped. Stolen? Are you insane? I am the wife of the owner. Henri reached under the... He had to use two hands, but he did it with a grim satisfaction. The two halves clattered onto the glass counter. What are you doing? Ashley shrieked, lunging forward. That is my property. Correction, Henri said, his voice dropping to a frosty chill. This is the property of the Vance Family Trust, and the trustee has flagged all cards issued to unauthorized users as compromised. Unauthorized user? Ashley sputtered. I have been using this card for 5 years. Who flagged it? Reginald. Preston. No, Henri said quietly. The flag came from the chairman. Ashley looked confused. Reginald is the chairman. Call him. Call him right now. Henri shook his head slowly. I am not referring to your father-in-law, Mrs. Vance. I received a call 10 minutes ago from the Swiss Heritage Bank, from Miss Jasmine Vance. Ashley froze. Her eyes went wide. Jasmine? That broke little teacher? She does not have the authority to freeze a gym membership, let alone a black card. This is a mistake. She must have hacked the system. Henri picked up the cut pieces of the card and dropped them into the trash bin. Miss Jasmine Vance is the sole signatory on the Shadow Trust, which secures all credit lines for your family. She instructed us to confiscate any payment methods attempted today. He looked at Sloane and Muffy, who were now actively backing away towards the door, clutching their own purses tight. Ladies, Henri said, addressing the friends, unless you are paying for Mrs. Vance's items separately, I suggest you give us some privacy. Sloane cleared her throat. Oh, look at the time. I have a Pilates class. Muffy grabbed her arm. Yes, and I have to pick up the kids. Ashley, call us later, okay? Good luck. They fled. They ran out of that store faster than rats leaving a sinking ship. Ashley was left alone, standing at the counter with $80,000 worth of merchandise she could not pay for. The humiliation was... Her face was a mask of red, blotchy anger and panic. She fumbled for her phone. I am calling Preston, she hissed. He will fix this. He will have your job. He will burn this store to the ground. She dialed her husband on speakerphone. It rang once, twice. Then Preston picked up. But he wasn't sounding like the arrogant prince he was this morning. He was shouting. Ashley, where are you? I am at Hermes, Ashley cried, tears finally spilling over. They cut my card, Preston. They cut the black card. That little witch Jasmine did something. You need to fix it. Wire me money right now. I am being humiliated. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, terrifying silence. Then Preston's voice came back cracked and panicked. I cannot wire you anything, Ashley. What do you mean? Ashley screamed, stamping her foot. You have millions! My cards aren't working either, Preston yelled back. I am at the dealership. They said the lease was revoked. They took the keys, Ashley. They took the car back. Ashley gripped the counter for support. What is happening, Preston? I do not know, he sobbed. I checked the bank app. It says 0. It all says 0. Accounts frozen, pending audit. Ashley, you need to come home. Dad is freaking out. The electricity at the office just got cut off. Ashley lowered the phone slowly. She looked at the Birkin bag sitting in its beautiful orange box. The bag she had already mentally posted on Instagram. Henri reached out and gently pulled the box away from her. He placed it under the counter. Will there be anything else, Mrs. Vance? Henri asked, his voice polite but final. Perhaps something from the clearance section. Oh, wait. We do not have a clearance section. Ashley let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. She ran out onto the street into the harsh afternoon light, where her friends were nowhere to be seen. I sat on the subway train, and for the first time in years, I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was a laugh of pure relief. I took the $20 bill out of my pocket and smoothed it against my leg. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered. The value wasn't in the paper. It was in the lesson. Ashley had just learned her first lesson in economics. Credit is a privilege, not a right, and privileges can be revoked. But the war was far from over. I had cut off their supply lines, but a wounded animal is most dangerous when it is cornered. Preston and my father would not go down without a fight. They would come for me. They would try to destroy me. Let them come. I had the truth. I had the law. And I had $20. That was all I needed. While Ashley was running from the Hermes store in humiliation, 30 floors up in the gleaming glass tower of Vance Industries, her husband and father-in-law were about to have a very bad afternoon. I sat in a quiet coffee shop across the street from the headquarters, watching the building through the rain-streaked window. On my laptop screen, I had a direct feed to the company financial dashboard, courtesy of Director Sterling. It was not a hacking tool. It was simply the chairman access portal, the access they did not know I had. I took a sip of my latte and watched the green status lights on their dashboard turn red, one by one. It started in the corner office on the 42nd floor. Preston was sitting with his feet up on his mahogany desk, throwing a foam basketball at a hoop mounted on the door. He was already mentally spending the rent money from the building he had just evicted me from. His phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, expecting it to be the yacht broker confirming his new purchase. Instead, it was the vice president of lending at First National Bank. Preston answered with his usual arrogance. Make it quick. I am a busy man. There was no polite greeting on the other end. Mr. Vance, this is a courtesy call to inform you that your auto loans for the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, and the McLaren have been flagged for immediate recall. Preston laughed, dropping the foam ball. Recall? What are you talking about? I paid the interest last month. The voice on the phone was cold. Your loans were secured by the equity in the Vance Family Trust. As of 20 minutes ago, the collateral was removed by the primary trustee. Your loans are now unsecured and in default. You have 4 hours to pay the remaining balance of $3.2 million, or we will dispatch the repossession team. Preston sat up so fast his expensive ergonomic chair nearly tipped over. $3 million? Are you insane? I do not keep that kind of cash in a checking account. Just charge it to the business line. That line has also been frozen, Mr. Vance. Preston slammed the phone down. He was sweating. He tried to log into his personal banking app. Access denied. He tried to transfer funds from his crypto wallet. Insufficient authorization. Panic began to set in. It was a cold, slimy feeling in his gut. He stood up and ran down the hallway to his father's office. He burst in without knocking. "Dad, we have a problem. The bank is glitching. They are trying to take my cars." Reginald Vance did not look up. He was staring at his computer screen, his face a mask of pale gray terror. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his mouse. "Shut up, Preston," Reginald whispered. "Dad, you do not understand," Preston yelled. "They want $3 million by 5 o'clock. He turned the monitor so Preston could see. It was the login screen for their secret account in the Cayman Islands. The account where they hid the kickbacks, the embezzled funds, and the stolen pension money. Usually it showed a balance of $50 million. Today, it showed a flashing red box. Critical alert. Liquidity covenant violated. Account locked by auditor. It is gone, Preston. It is all locked. Reginald loosened his tie, gasping for air. "I tried to move funds to cover payroll, and the system locked me out. It says we are under audit." Preston sank into a chair. Audit. Who authorized an audit? We control the board. We control the CFO. Nobody audits us. Reginald paced the room, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. It must be the Harrington Group. They have been trying to acquire us for years. They must have bribed— "Fix this!" Reginald screamed into the receiver. "I do not care what it takes. Reboot the servers. Wipe the drives if you have to. Just get me back into the accounts." But it was not a virus, and no amount of rebooting would fix it. I watched the data stream on my laptop. I saw their frantic attempts to bypass the security. Every time they tried to move money, I got a notification. Access blocked. They were running around the office like rats in a burning maze, trying to find an exit that I had already sealed. They blamed their rivals. They blamed hackers. They blamed the Russians. Not once did they say my name. To them, I was just Jasmine, the history teacher. I was the girl who drove a Honda Civic. I was the girl they had left in the rain with $20. The idea that I could be the architect of their destruction was simply impossible to them. Their arrogance was their blindfold. I closed the financial deck. I had prepared a draft earlier that morning. It was time to light the match. The email was simple. The subject line read, "Confidential Internal Audit Report. Discrepancies in Executive Spending." Attached to the email were 3 PDF files. File 1 was titled The Cayman Ledger. It detailed every illegal transfer Reginald had made in the last 10 years. File 2 was titled Preston Vance Personal Expenditures. It showed the company money used for gambling, hookers, and cars. File 3 was titled Ashley Vance, Fraudulent Invoices. It contained the receipts for her handbags and jewelry listed as office supplies. I moved the cursor to the recipient field. I did not send it to the police. Not yet. That would be too easy. I needed them to lose their power first. I selected the distribution list labeled Board of Directors. These were the 12 most powerful investors in the company. Men and women who, if they found out Reginald and Preston were stealing from them, they would not just fire them. They would destroy them. I took a deep breath. My finger hovered over the enter key. For Grandpa, I whispered. I pressed send. Across the street in the corner office, the silence was heavy. Reginald and Preston were sitting in the dark, staring at the frozen computer screen, trying to come up with a lie to tell the shareholders why the stock price was about to plummet. Suddenly, Reginald's cell phone buzzed. Then his desk phone rang. Then Preston's cell phone buzzed. Then the intercom on the desk beeped. It was the terrified secretary. Mr. Vance, sir? I have Mr. Sterling on line 1. I have the chairwoman of the pension fund on line 2, and 3 members of the board are in the lobby demanding to see you immediately. Reginald stared at the phone. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking old and frail. What is happening? He whispered. How do they know? He looked at his email inbox. A notification popped up. He clicked it. He saw the subject line. He saw the sender. It was sent from an anonymous address, but the signature at the bottom of the email was not anonymous. It read simply, "The $20 investment." Reginald looked at Preston. His eyes were wide with a dawning horror. He finally realized it wasn't the Harrington Group. It wasn't the Russians. The phone rang again, shrill and demanding. It sounded like a fire alarm. "Answer it, Dad," Preston cried, his voice cracking. "What do we do?" Reginald slowly reached for the receiver. His hand was heavy as lead. He knew that the moment he lifted that phone, his life as a billionaire was over. The walls of his glass castle were shattering, and there was nowhere left to hide. I closed my laptop and finished my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted sweet. I left a $20 tip on the table for the waitress. I walked out of the coffee shop and stood on the sidewalk looking up at the tower. I could see the silhouette of my father standing at the window, looking down at the city he thought he owned. I pulled my coat tighter against the wind. The eviction notice they had served me this morning was still in my pocket, but I wouldn't need an apartment tonight. I hailed a taxi. "To the Ritz-Carlton, please," I told the driver. "And I would like to book the presidential suite for the month." The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, skeptical of my simple clothes. "That is expensive, miss. Do you have a reservation?" I smiled and patted my pocket where the black card from Director Sterling was resting warm and ready. "Do not worry," I said. "My family is paying for it." My classroom at Southside High was usually a sanctuary. It was a place where the noise of the city faded away, replaced by the rustle of textbook pages and the scratching of pencils. I loved my students. They were kids from the neighborhood, kids who had seen more hardship in 16 years than my family had seen in 3 generations. They were resilient and hungry for knowledge, and they respected me not because of my last name or my bank account, but because I showed up for them every single day. We were in the middle of a lesson about the fall of Rome. I was standing at the whiteboard drawing a timeline explaining how internal corruption and overspending contributed to the collapse of one of history's greatest empires. The irony was not lost on me. As I spoke about emperors who fiddled while their city burned, I could see the faces of my father and Preston in my mind. But the peace of my sanctuary was about to be shattered. At 2:15 in the afternoon, the heavy door to my classroom did not just open, it exploded inward, hitting the wall with a deafening crash that made half my students jump out of their desks. Standing in the doorway was Ashley. She looked like a woman who had been unraveling thread by thread since she fled the Hermes store. Her blonde hair, usually sprayed into helmet-like perfection, was windblown and frizzy. Her mascara was smeared beneath her eyes, giving her the look of a deranged raccoon. She was still clutching her empty designer purse, her knuckles white with rage. The silence in the room was absolute. 30 teenagers stared at the woman in the doorway, confused and wary. They knew danger when they saw it, and Ashley Vance, radiating entitlement and fury, was dangerous. "Where is she?" Ashley screamed, her voice cracking. "Where is the little thief?" I put my dry erase marker down on the tray. I turned slowly to face her. My heart was pounding, but I forced my face to remain as impassive as stone. "Ashley," I said, my voice calm and authoritative, the voice I used to break up hallway fights. "You are interrupting a class. Please leave." Ashley marched into the room. She ignored the students completely, as if they were furniture. She walked right up to my desk, invading my personal space, smelling of stale perfume and panic. "Don't you dare tell me to leave," she spat. "You did this. I know you did this. You put some kind of hold on the accounts. You called the bank and told lies about us." I crossed my arms. "I did not lie, Ashley. I simply ensured that the assets of the Vance Family Trust were protected from unauthorized looters." "Looters?" she shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red. "I am your sister-in-law. I am a Vance. That money is mine. How dare you cut me off?" I was standing at the counter at Hermes Jasmine. "Do you know how embarrassing that was? They cut my card. They treated me like a criminal because of you." My students were exchanging glances. In this neighborhood, when a rich white woman comes in screaming at a black teacher, cameras start rolling for protection. But I decided to take it a step further. If Ashley wanted to make a scene, I would give her an audience. I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and opened the Instagram app. I navigated to the live feature. I typed in a caption. "When the billionaire lifestyle collapses." I tapped the red button. "Hello, everyone," I said, addressing the phone in my hand. "I am currently in my classroom where my sister-in-law, Ashley Vance, has decided to pay us a visit. Say hello, Ashley." Ashley stared at the phone, her eyes bulging. "Put that away. You cannot record me." "You burst into a public school classroom, Ashley," I said. Ashley looked at the viewer count ticking up rapidly. She should have backed down. She should have run. But her arrogance was a blinding force. She lunged for the phone. "Give me that, you poverty-stricken little rat," she screamed. "You are jealous. That is what this is. You are jealous because Preston married me and not some boring nobody like you. You are jealous because we have the mansions and the cars and you have this." She gestured wildly at my classroom, at the chipped paint on the walls and the mismatched desks. "You have nothing, Jasmine. You are a loser teacher earning pennies while we run the city. Undo the freeze. Call Sterling right now and tell him it was a mistake, or I swear to God, I will ruin you. I will have you fired. I will plant drugs in your car. I will make sure people were tagging news outlets. Ashley was digging her own grave with every word, but she was too angry to see the shovel in her hand. I looked at my students. They were looking at me, waiting to see what I would do, waiting to see if I would let this woman crush me the way the world often tried to crush them. I stepped forward. I did not shout. I lowered my voice, forcing Ashley to stop screaming just to hear me. "You are right, Ashley," I said. "I do not have a mansion. I do not have a yacht. I do not have an $80,000 handbag." I pointed the camera at the whiteboard where the timeline of Rome was drawn. "We were just discussing history today, Ashley. We were talking about the French Revolution. Do you know who Marie Antoinette was?" Ashley blinked, confused by the sudden change in topic. "Who cares about some dead French lady? Give me my money." "She was a queen who lived in luxury while her people starved," I continued, my voice hard as steel. When she was told that the peasants had no bread, she reportedly said, "Let them eat cake." She lived in a bubble of gold and ignorance, thinking that her title would protect her forever. I took a step closer to Ashley, holding the phone up so the world could see the fear starting to creep into her eyes. "You are Marie Antoinette, Ashley. You have spent years eating cake paid for by stolen money. You have looked down on me, on my students, on anyone who actually works for a living. You thought the party would never end. You thought the credit card would never decline." I leaned in. But history has a funny way of repeating itself. The people eventually get tired of paying for your cake. The gates come down, and the bill comes due. Ashley opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She looked at the phone, then at me, then at the students who were now standing up silently backing their teacher. "You are not the queen of this city," I said. "You are just a trespasser in my classroom." And class is dismissed. I looked over Ashley's shoulder to the doorway. 2 school security officers had arrived. They were big men who did not care about designer labels. "Get her out of here," I said calmly. The officers stepped into the room. One of them reached for Ashley's arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." "Do not touch me," Ashley shrieked, trying to pull away. "Do you know who I am? My husband owns this block." "Your husband does not own anything right now, lady," the officer said, gripping her arm firmly. "You are trespassing on government property. Let us go." They began to drag her out. Ashley kicked and screamed, her heels skidding on the linoleum. "Preston will kill you for this, Jasmine," she howled as she was hauled into the hallway. "You will pay. You will regret the day you were born." Her voice faded as they dragged her down the corridor toward the exit. The sound of her screaming echoed off the lockers, a ghostly reminder of a crumbling dynasty. I turned back to the phone. The viewer count was now at 15,000. "That was Ashley Vance," I said to the camera. "Wife of Preston Vance. Remember that name when you see the headlines tomorrow, because the reign of terror is over." I ended the live stream. The room was silent for a heartbeat. Then slowly, one student started clapping, then another. Then the whole room erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was cheering. It was the sound of people who had just watched a bully get punched in the nose. I felt my knees shaking. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving me exhausted. But I stood tall. I walked back to the whiteboard and picked up my marker. I looked at my students. "Now," I said, my voice steady, Where were we? Ah, yes, the fall of the empire. I turned to the board and circled the date 476 AD. Sometimes, I said, writing on the board, empires do not fall because of invading armies. Sometimes they fall because they rot from the inside. And sometimes, all it takes to push them over the edge is one person who decides to stop holding them up. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Director Sterling. He had been watching the live stream. The message was short. Brilliant. The board of directors just saw the video. They are calling an emergency vote. I smiled. The first domino had fallen. Ashley had just given me the weapon I needed to destroy their reputation. But Preston and Reginald were still out there. And now that they knew I wasn't afraid to fight in public, they would stop at nothing to silence me. I looked out the window at the parking lot where a police cruiser was pulling up to take Ashley away. Let them come, I thought. I have an army of my own now, and history is on my side. The text message from my mother arrived at 4 in the afternoon. It was the first time she had texted me in 3 years without asking for a favor or criticizing my hair. It read simply, "Jasmine, please come home for dinner tonight. Your father wants to make things right. We miss you." I stared at the screen and almost laughed. They did not miss me. They missed their credit cards. They missed their access to the company accounts. They missed the feeling of safety that I had stripped away from them piece by piece over the last 24 hours. But I knew this was coming. Lawyer James had tipped me off an hour earlier. He told me that my father was desperate. He told me that Reginald Vance was ready to negotiate. I did not dress up for the occasion. I wore my simple teaching clothes, a pair of slacks, and a blouse. I drove my beat-up Honda Civic up the winding driveway of the Vance estate. The mansion loomed against the gray sky, a monument to my grandfather's hard work and my father's ego. It looked the same as always, but the energy was different. The lights were on in every room, a desperate attempt to look welcoming. When I walked through the front door, I expected a fight. Instead, I got a performance. My mother, Vivian, was waiting in the foyer. She was wearing an apron over her silk dress, something I had never seen in my entire life. Her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had been crying. When she saw me, she rushed forward and wrapped me in a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and fear. "Oh, Jasmine, my baby," she sobbed, clutching my shoulders. "I am so glad you are here. We have been so worried about you." I stood stiff in her arms. Worried about me? Yesterday you watched your daughter-in-law throw my life into trash bags and you said nothing. Yesterday you let Dad call me a disappointment. I gently pushed her away. "Hello, Mother." Come inside," Vivian said, wiping her eyes theatrically. "I made your favorite, seafood gumbo, just the way Grandpa used to teach me. I spent all afternoon in the kitchen." The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates that were usually reserved for senators and business tycoons. My father, Reginald, was sitting at the head of the table. He stood up when I entered. He forced a smile that looked like it caused him physical pain. "Jasmine," he said, gesturing to the chair to his right, "please sit." Preston was there too, sitting opposite me. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and he was nursing a glass of scotch with a shaking hand. He did not look at me. He just stared at the tablecloth, probably mourning the loss of his Aston Martin. I sat down. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Lawyer James was sitting at the far end of the table, silently observing. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "So, Jasmine," my father began, unfolding his napkin, "how are things at the school? We heard about the incident with Ashley today. I reached for the water glass. "She was arrested, Dad. She is currently in a holding cell because she tried to assault a police officer." Reginald waved his hand dismissively. "We have lawyers working on that. But let us not talk about unpleasant things. We are a family. Families fight, but they always come back together." Vivian brought out the tureen of gumbo. She ladled a generous portion into my bowl. It smelled delicious, rich and spicy, but my appetite was gone. I looked at the food and wondered if this was how a condemned prisoner felt at their last meal. Or maybe I was the executioner, and this was their last meal. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The only sound was the clinking of silver against porcelain. Finally, Reginald put down his spoon. He wiped his mouth and leaned forward. His voice took on that smooth, persuasive tone he used in boardrooms. "Jasmine, look. Grandfather leaving you that $20 bill, it was a shock to all of us. We reacted poorly." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "We want to make it right. You are a Vance. You deserve to live like one. You should not be struggling in that small apartment. You should not be driving that old car." He wrote something on a check, tore it off, and slid it across the table face down. "I want to buy out your share," Reginald said softly. "I know you have some small influence with the bank right now, probably a temporary administrative hold Grandpa set up. It is causing a lot of headaches for the company, so here is the offer. Sign a document relinquishing all claims to the Vance Family Trust and giving full control back to me." I looked at the check. I did not turn it over yet. "And in exchange," I asked. Reginald smiled a shark-like grin. "Turn it over." I flipped the check. $1 million. More money than I would make in 20 years of teaching. It was freedom. It was safety. It was everything they thought I wanted. Preston looked up from his drink. "Take it, Jasmine," he muttered. "Just take it and go. It is more than you deserve." My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. "Think of what you could do with that money, sweetie. You could travel. You could buy a nice condo. You could finally find a husband." I stared at the check. Then I looked at my father. $1 million? I repeated. Reginald nodded eagerly. "Cash, as soon as the bank's open tomorrow." I picked up the check. I held it up to the light. Then I set it back down and looked my father dead in the eye. "There is just one problem, Dad." "What is that?" Reginald asked, his smile faltering. "This check is worth—" "You do not have $1 million, Dad. In fact, as of this morning, you do not even have $1,000. Your personal accounts are frozen. The corporate accounts are frozen. The offshore accounts are locked." Reginald's face turned a shade of purple. "That is just a glitch. It will be fixed by tomorrow." "No, it won't," I said calmly, "because I am the one who froze them, and I am the only one who can unfreeze them." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. But that is not the interesting part. The interesting part is where you thought you were going to get this money from. Because I know you, Dad. You never admit defeat. So I did a little digging before I came here. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and slid it across the table. This is a copy of a loan agreement signed at 4:30 this afternoon. $5 million at 25% interest, collateralized by the deed to this mansion. You mortgaged the house, Dad. You mortgaged the roof over Mom's head to try and bribe me with money you do not even have yet. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. Reginald, you didn't. You promised me the house was safe. Shut up, Vivian, Reginald snapped, slamming his hand on the table. He glared at me, hatred burning in his eyes. The act was over. The loving father was gone. You ungrateful little brat. I built this family. I built this life. Who do you think you are to come in here with your $20 bill and tell me how to run my business? You are a teacher. You are nobody. I stood up. I didn't rush. I stood up slowly, unfolding my full height. I am not nobody, Dad. I am the chairman. I picked up the check for $1 million and ripped it in half. And I certainly do not want to be part of a family that steals, lies, and mortgages their home to cover up their crimes. Reginald stood up too, knocking his chair over. Get out. Get out of my house. It is not your house anymore, I said, my voice ice cold. You signed the deed over to Apex Capital, and since the Shadow Trust owns the first lien on this property, that contract you signed today triggered a default clause. I looked at Lawyer James. James, would you mind explaining to my father what happens next? Lawyer James stood up and cleared his throat. Certainly, Miss Vance. Mr. Vance, because you attempted to use trust property as collateral for a high-risk personal loan without the trustee's consent, you have violated the morality clause of the grandfather's will. Morality clause? Reginald sputtered. What morality clause? The one that says the CEO can be removed immediately for reckless endangerment of family assets, Lawyer James said. I looked at my father, who is now trembling with rage and fear. You wanted to know what I want, I asked. I do not want $1 million. I walked to the head of the table. I stood right next to him. I want the seat. Reginald stared at me. You cannot be serious. You cannot run a $1 billion company. Watch me, I whispered. I turned to my mother and Preston. Pack your bags. The auditors are coming tomorrow morning to inventory the estate. If anything is missing, if one spoon, one painting, or one pearl earring is gone, I will have you prosecuted for theft, just like Ashley. I walked to the door. I paused and looked back at the family dinner that had turned into a funeral for their lifestyle. The gumbo was delicious, Mom. Pity you won't be able to afford the ingredients next time. I walked out of the mansion, and I was going to clean house, starting from the top floor down. The morning after I walked out of my parents' mansion, the sun rose over Chicago, but my world was already dark. I woke up not to the sound of my alarm, but to the relentless buzzing of my phone. It was vibrating against my nightstand like a trapped insect. I rolled over and squinted at the screen. I had 300 unread text messages, 50 missed calls, and thousands of notifications on social media. My stomach dropped. I knew this feeling. It was the feeling of a tsunami hitting the shore before you even hear the warning siren. I unlocked my phone and opened the local news app. The headline made me gasp aloud. Scandal at Southside High. Local teacher Jasmine Vance accused of inappropriate relations with administration and drug use on campus. There was a photo of me. It was a grainy picture taken from a distance while I was talking to my principal in the parking lot last week. We were just discussing the budget for new textbooks. But the angle made it look intimate. It made it look like I was leaning in to whisper a secret. And next to it was another photo, a picture of me in college at a party, holding a red Solo cup, looking tired. The caption read, "Party Girl or Predator? The Secret Life of the Vance Heiress." I sat up in bed, my hands shaking. This was Preston. This had Preston's fingerprints all over it. He had hired a crisis management firm. He had hired the kind of people who specialize in character assassination. They knew they could not beat me in the boardroom, so they decided to destroy me in the classroom. They wanted to strip away the one thing I valued more than money, my reputation as an educator. My phone rang again. It was Principal Davies. I stared at his name on the screen. He was a good man, a man who had mentored me. "Jasmine, I am so sorry, Principal Davies," said his voice, sounding tired and strained. "The school board has been bombarded with calls since 6 this morning. Parents are threatening to pull their kids. The superintendent is breathing down my neck." I closed my eyes. "Tell me straight, Principal Davies. Am I fired?" "Not fired," he said quickly, "but suspended, pending an investigation. You cannot come to campus, Jasmine. You cannot contact the students. We have to let the dust settle." I hung up the phone and felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was different from the anger I felt at the will reading. That was personal. This was professional. They had crossed a line that should never be crossed. They had dragged my students and my school into their messy, greedy war. I walked into my living room. On the coffee table sat a silver flash drive. It was the drive Director Sterling had given me. I had planned to be civil. I had planned to follow the legal process. But Preston and my father did not believe in the legal process. They believed in the court of public opinion. They wanted a media circus. They wanted to throw mud and see what stuck. "Fine," I whispered, picking up the flash drive. "You want a circus? I will be the ringmaster." I opened my laptop. I did not log into my school email. Instead, I logged into a secure, encrypted email service. I found the contact information for the biggest investigative journalist in Chicago, a woman named Sarah Jenkins who ran the blog The Windy City Truth. She had been trying to get an interview with my father for years, but he always snubbed her, calling her a tabloid hack. I typed a subject line: "The Vance Family Financials, the Real Story." I inserted the flash drive. I selected the files. Preston wanted to talk about illicit activities. Let us talk about them. It contained copies of wire transfers totaling $5 million to the Bellagio and the Wynn casinos. It included scans of promissory notes signed by Preston, where he pledged company assets to cover his baccarat losses. But the piece de resistance was a video file. A security camera clip from a private room in a high rollers club showing Preston snorting something off a glass table while bragging about how his daddy owns the police. Then I attached a folder labeled Ashley Vance Personal Services. This was the one that would break the internet. Ashley had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a personal tennis coach named Marco. The invoices were billed to the Vance Industries marketing department as consulting fees, but I had the text messages. Hundreds of them. Explicit messages between Ashley and Marco detailing exactly what kind of consulting he was doing in hotel rooms while Preston was in Vegas. And finally, I attached the file on my father. The emails where he instructed his accountants to falsify tax returns. The memos where he called his own employees peasants and idiots. I wrote a short message to Sarah Jenkins. You have 1 hour to publish this before I send it to the New York Times. The narrative changes today. I hit send. Then I made a pot of coffee and waited. It did not take an hour. It took 40 minutes. I refreshed the browser and there it was. The headline was in bold red letters across the top of the Windy City Truth. The Vance Papers. How Chicago's golden family stole billions and lied to you. The article was a bombshell. It laid out everything. The gambling, the affairs, the embezzlement, the tax fraud. And right in the middle of the article, Sarah Jenkins had included a section about the smear campaign against me. She wrote, "It appears the accusations against Jasmine Vance, the only member of the family not implicated in these crimes, were a calculated distraction. While her brother was betting company payroll on black, and her sister-in-law was paying for companionship with corporate funds, Jasmine Vance was teaching history in a public school. The evidence suggests she is not the villain of this story. She is the whistleblower." I went to Twitter. The hashtag #FireJasmineVance, which Preston's bots had been trending all morning, was suddenly disappearing. In its place, a new hashtag was rising. Justice for Jasmine. I watched the comments roll in. The public mood shifted like the wind. 1 minute they were calling me a predator. The next, they were calling me a hero. "Look at the receipts," one user wrote. "Preston Vance lost $5 million while refusing to give his employees a raise. Sickening." Another user posted the picture of Ashley. "So let me get this straight. She called Jasmine poor while she was using stolen money to pay her boy toy. The audacity is infinite." My phone started buzzing again. But it was support. Students were posting videos defending me. Parents were commenting that I was the best teacher their kids ever had. And then the phone calls started from the other side. Preston called. I sent it to voicemail. Ashley called. I sent it to voicemail. My father called. I picked up. "Jasmine!" he screamed, his voice sounding like he was on the verge of a stroke. "What have you done? There are reporters on the lawn. There are helicopters over the house." I took a sip of my coffee. "I thought you liked attention, Dad. You always said there is no such thing as bad publicity." "You ruined us!" he yelled. "The stock price is in free fall. The board is calling for my head. Ashley locked herself in the bathroom and won't come out. Preston is throwing up in the garden." I walked to the window and looked out at the city. The rain had stopped and the sun was shining bright and clear. "You ruined yourselves, Dad," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights." I hung up. I knew this wasn't the end. A wounded animal fights the hardest right before it dies. My father would try one last desperate move. He would try to use the law. He would try to claim the evidence was obtained illegally. He would try to bury me in court. But he didn't know that I had one more card to play. A card that would ensure he didn't just lose his company. A card that would ensure he lost his freedom. I looked at the $20 bill sitting on my counter. It was just a piece of paper, but it had brought down an empire. I picked up my keys. It was time to go to the office. Not my classroom, but the headquarters of Vance Industries. It was time to take my seat at the head of the table. The text message that finally broke my brother Preston arrived at 2 in the morning. It was not a long message. It was a single photograph sent from an unregistered number. The photo showed the front door of the luxury condo where Preston was currently hiding. But it was not just a picture of a door. Resting on the welcome mat was a pair of rusted garden shears. Below the photo was a text that read, "You have 24 hours to pay the $5 million, or we start taking fingers. One for every million." Preston Vance was a man who had never known true fear. He had known stress when the stock market dipped. He had known annoyance when his latte was cold. But he had never known the primal terror of being hunted. He was sitting on the floor of his bathroom, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. He had called every friend he had. He had called every contact in his phone. Nobody answered. When you are a falling star, everyone wishes upon you, but nobody catches you. He had one option left. One person who had the power to stop the bleeding. The person he had spent his entire life. It was a place with sticky floors and the smell of stale beer and regret. A place where nobody knew the name Vance and nobody cared about stock prices. I arrived 10 minutes early. I ordered a soda and sat in the back booth watching the door. When Preston walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. The golden boy of Chicago looked like a ghost. His designer suit was wrinkled and stained. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. His eyes darted around the room, scanning for danger in every shadow. He saw me and rushed over, practically collapsing into the booth opposite me. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Jasmine, thank God," Preston whispered, his voice hoarse. "You have to help me. They are going to kill me. They sent a picture of shears, Jasmine. They are going to cut off my fingers." I looked at him calmly. I did not feel satisfaction. I thought I would. I thought seeing him broken would make me happy, but it just felt sad. It was like watching a sickly animal that had been kicked too many times. I took a sip of my soda. $5 million is a lot of money, Preston. That is a lot of gambling debts. "It is not just gambling," he stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I borrowed against the cars. I borrowed against the condo. I owe people you do not want to know. Please, Jasmine, unfreeze the trust, just for an hour. Let me pay them, and I promise I will disappear. I will go to Europe. You will never see me again." I shook my head slowly. "I cannot do that, Preston. The moment I unfreeze the trust, the FBI will swoop in. The accounts are evidence now. If I move money for you, I go to jail too." Preston put his head in his hands and began to sob. It was a pathetic sound. Preston looked up, hope flaring in his eyes, desperate and wild. "What? Anything. I will do anything." "I have a slush fund," I said. "A personal emergency fund that Grandpa left me separate from the main trust. It has exactly $5 million in it. It is clean money. I can wire it to your creditors within the hour." Preston reached across the table, grabbing my wrist this time. "Do it. Please, Jasmine, do it. I will pay you back, I swear." "I do not want you to pay me back," I said, pulling my arm away. "I want a trade." "A trade?" Preston asked, confused. "I want Dad." Preston blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I need evidence, Preston. Real evidence. I have the bank records, but Dad is slippery. He is already spinning a narrative that you and I nodded. "Exactly. He is cutting you loose. So I want you to cut him loose first. I want a confession. I want you to go to him wearing a wire. I want you to get him to admit that he authorized the fake invoices, that he knew about the Cayman accounts, that he ordered the tax fraud. Preston recoiled. I cannot do that. He is my father. He is the man who let you borrow money from the mob, I countered. He is the man who watched you drown in addiction and did nothing but hand you a shovel to dig deeper. Preston looked down at his hands. His manicured fingernails were chewed down to the quick. He thought about the garden shears. He thought about the pain. If I do this, he whispered, if I get the recording, you pay the debt. Today. I pulled out my phone and showed him the transfer screen. The money was ready. Bring me the recording, Preston, and you get to keep your fingers. He stood up. An hour later, Preston Vance walked into the temporary office my father had set up in a hotel suite. Reginald Vance was pacing the room, shouting at a team of expensive lawyers. When he saw Preston enter, he stopped. I told you not to come here, Reginald barked. You are a liability, Preston. Get out before I call the police. Preston didn't leave. He walked over to the minibar and poured himself a water. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to focus. The small digital recorder taped to his chest felt like it was burning a hole in his skin. I am leaving, Dad, Preston said quietly. I just came to say goodbye. I am going to turn myself in. Reginald laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. Good. Go ahead. Tell them everything. Tell them how you stole from the company to play poker. I will, Preston said, turning to face his father. But I am... Reginald's face turned purple. You keep your mouth shut about that. Why? Preston pressed, stepping closer. Are you afraid they will find out about the pension fund? The $20 million you took from the workers' retirement to buy the jet? Reginald grabbed Preston by the lapels of his jacket. Listen to me, you idiot. That pension fund theft saved this company. If I hadn't cooked those books, we would have gone under 10 years ago. I did what I had to do. I falsified those returns to keep us afloat. I authorized every single transfer, and I would do it again. You are just too weak to understand the burden of leadership. Preston stood there, letting his father shake him. He looked into the eyes of the man he had worshipped his entire life and saw nothing but selfishness. You are right, Dad, Preston said softly. I am weak, but I am learning. He pulled away from his father. Goodbye, Dad. He walked out of the hotel. When the doors closed, he leaned against the metal wall and let out a long, shuddering breath. He reached into his shirt and peeled the tape off his skin. He held the tiny black device in his hand. It was light, but it carried the weight of a prison sentence. We met again at the bar 2 hours later. The place was emptier now, just a few drunks nursing their sorrows. Preston slid into the booth. He didn't say a word. He just slid the small USB drive across the sticky table. I picked it up. Is it on here? I asked. Preston nodded, staring at the table. Everything. He admitted to the pension theft. He admitted to the tax fraud. He admitted that he taught me how to launder the money. It is all there. I plugged the drive into my laptop and put on my headphones. I listened to the file. The audio was crisp and clear. My father's voice, arrogant and angry, confessing to federal crimes. It was the nail in the coffin. He was going away for life. I closed the laptop and put the drive in my pocket. I picked up my phone and pressed the transfer button. Done, I said. The funds are with your creditors. You are free, Preston. Preston let out a sob of relief. He slumped against the seat looking like a deflated balloon. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you. He looked at me, expecting me to smile, expecting me to welcome him back into the fold now that he had betrayed our father. But I just looked at him. I looked at the brother who had laughed at me at the will reading, the brother who had tried to destroy my career, the brother who had just sold his own father to save his fingers. I stood up and gathered my things. You know, Preston, I said, looking down at him. Dad was a monster. But at least he had a code. He was loyal to the dollar until the end. Preston looked up, his eyes red and watery. What do you mean? I patted the pocket where the USB drive sat. I mean that you are worse than him. He would have burned the world down to save you, and you just sold him out for $5 million. I shook my head. You sold your father for the price of a few bad hands of poker. That is your legacy, Preston. You are not a businessman. You are just a coward. I turned and walked out of the bar. I stepped into the cool night air. The city lights were twinkling in the distance. I had the evidence. I had the power. I had won. But as I walked to my car, I didn't feel like a winner. I felt heavy. I realized that in destroying my family, I was uncovering just how rotten they truly were. Grandpa Elijah had left me $20 because he knew it was the only clean thing in the entire estate. I drove toward the FBI field office. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket. It was time to finish this. It was time to put the Vance dynasty where it belonged, behind bars. The heavy oak doors of the Vance estate had once been a gateway to... Tonight, they felt like the entrance to a tomb. I did not knock. I did not ring the bell. I simply placed my hand on the scanner and let the heavy lock disengage with a mechanical thud. I was still the owner, after all. Behind me, Lawyer James adjusted his briefcase, and two large men in dark suits stepped forward. They were not police. Not yet. They were private security contractors, ex-military men who I had hired to ensure that the final act of this tragedy played out without violence. Or at least without violence directed at me. We walked into the living room. The curtains were drawn tight against the prying lenses of the paparazzi helicopters that had been circling all afternoon. The room smelled of stale bourbon and fear. My family was gathered there, sitting on the plush velvet sofas like mourners at a wake. Reginald sat with his head in his hands, his tie undone, his shirt rumpled. Preston was pacing by the fireplace, nursing a glass of amber liquid. Ashley was curled in a chair, clutching a pillow, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. When I entered the room, the air shifted. Reginald looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. For a fleeting second, I saw relief in his face. He thought I was there to save them. He thought I had come to offer a lifeboat. Jasmine, he croaked, standing up unsteadily. Thank God, you came to your senses. Tell me you stopped this madness. Tell me you called the press off. I did not answer him. I motioned for the bodyguards to stand by the door. I walked to the center of the room. I looked at the three people who shared my blood and realized I felt absolutely nothing for them. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a cold, clinical pity. Lawyer James stepped forward and placed a sleek black speaker on the coffee table. Reginald frowned, looking from the speaker to me. What is this? We do not have time for games, Jasmine. The SEC is opening an investigation tomorrow. We need to get our story straight. We need to present a united front. He looked at Preston. Preston and I have been talking. We have a plan. We are going to blame the CFO. We will say he rogue. We will say he misled us. It is the only way to save the family name. Preston nodded vigorously, avoiding my eyes. That is right. It was the CFO. We were victims, Jasmine. Just like you. I looked at Preston. The cowardice radiating off him was almost nauseating. He was ready to send an innocent man to prison to save his own skin just hours after he had sold his own father to save his fingers. I shook my head slowly. There is no united front, Dad. There is no family name to save. I pressed the play button on the speaker. The voice that filled the room was crystal clear. It was Preston's voice, recorded just hours ago in the bar. Dad knew everything. He looked at the speaker, then he looked at Preston. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The recording continued. Preston's voice was whining, desperate. He falsified the tax returns. He took the pension money to buy the jet. He told me that if I did not sign the papers, he would cut me off. He is the mastermind, Jasmine. I was just following orders. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Preston shrank back against the fireplace mantel, gripping his glass so hard his knuckles turned white. Reginald turned to his son slowly. His face was a mask of disbelief that quickly morphed into a rage so pure it was terrifying. "You sold me out," Reginald whispered. His voice was trembling. "I gave you everything. I gave you a life most men only dream of. I covered your debts. I hid your mistakes. And you?" It happened so fast, the bodyguards barely had time to react. Reginald crossed the room and struck Preston across the face with an open palm. The sound of the slap cracked through the room like a gunshot. Preston stumbled back, dropping his glass. It shattered on the hearth, spraying bourbon and shards of crystal everywhere. "You traitor!" Reginald screamed, grabbing Preston by the lapels of his ruined suit. "You spineless little worm. I should have left you in that jail cell in Vegas 5 years ago." Ashley screamed, jumping up from her chair. "Stop it! Stop it, both of you!" She turned to me, her eyes wild. "Look what you are doing. You are destroying us. Are you happy now? Are you happy that you turned father against son?" I looked at her calmly. "I did not turn them against each other, Ashley. I just removed the money that was gluing them together. Without the money, you are not a family." This time, it was Reginald's voice filling the room. It was the recording from the bugged office phone, the one from the audit files. "Ashley is a liability. Her spending is out of control. If the auditors come close, we cut her loose. We say she embezzled the funds without our knowledge. We throw her to the wolves to save the core business." Ashley stopped screaming. She stared at the speaker, then she stared at Reginald. "You what?" she whispered. "You are going to frame me?" Reginald released Preston and spun around, panting. "Ashley, listen. That was just a contingency plan. It was hypothetical." Ashley let out a hysterical laugh. "Hypothetical? You old monster. I cooked your dinners. I hosted your galas. I lied for you to the press. And you were going to send me to prison?" She turned on Preston, hitting him on the chest with her fists. "And you knew! You knew he was going to do this to me, and you said nothing. There is nothing left," Preston yelled, pushing her away. "Can't you get that through your thick skull? There is nothing left to split. It is all gone. The room descended into chaos. Reginald was shouting at Preston. Preston was shouting at Ashley. Ashley was screaming about her wasted youth. They were like a pack of wolves that had run out of meat and were now turning to eat their own. Enough! My voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. They stopped panting, looking at me. They seemed to remember suddenly that I was there, that I was the one holding the keys. I walked to the coffee table. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the $20 bill. It was soft now, almost fabric-like from how many times I had held it. The edges were fraying. The ink was faded. I smoothed it out and placed it gently on the polished wood surface, right next to the high-tech speaker. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the bill. They looked. They looked at the crumpled piece of currency that they had laughed at only 48 hours ago. "This is you," I said softly. "This bill is old. It is wrinkled. It has been passed from hand to hand. It is dirty, but it has value because it stands for something. It stands for a promise." I looked at my father. "You stood for nothing, Dad. You thought value came from the number of zeros in a bank account. You thought dignity was something you could buy with a black card, but look at you now." I gestured to the scene before me. The shattered glass, the tear-stained faces, the violence. You are not a dynasty. You are a crime scene. You are cheap, you are crumpled, and unlike this bill, you have no value left. Reginald slumped onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. He looked small. He looked defeated. The arrogance that had fueled him for 60 years had finally run dry. "What do you want, Jasmine?" he whispered. "You have won. We are destroyed. What more do you want?" I looked at Lawyer James. He opened his briefcase and took out 3 thick envelopes. He placed them on the table next to the $20 bill. "These are plea deals," I said. They looked up, confusion warring with fear in their eyes. "I have spoken to the district attorney," I explained. "I handed over the audit files this morning, but I held back the recordings. I held back the proof of intent." Reginald sat up. "Why?" "Because Grandpa built this name," I said, my voice catching slightly. "And as much as I hate what you have done to it, I do not want the name Vance to be synonymous with a circus trial that drags on for years." I pointed to the envelopes. "You have a choice. Tonight, right now, you can take these envelopes. Inside is a confession agreement. You surrender to the FBI tomorrow morning voluntarily. You plead guilty to fraud and embezzlement. You accept the minimum sentences. Dad gets 10 years, Preston gets 5. Ashley gets probation and community service for the misuse of funds." Ashley began to cry again, quietly this time. "Or," I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper, "or I walk out of here and I send these recordings to Sarah Jenkins at the Windy City Truth. And tomorrow morning, instead of a quiet surrender, you will have CNN broadcasting your voices admitting to your crimes on national television. You will not get a plea deal. You will get the maximum sentence. 25 years for you, Dad. 15 for you, Preston." I looked at my watch. "It is 9 o'clock. You have until 9:15 to sign." I stepped back, giving them space. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock that had been bought by Elijah Vance 50 years ago. Then, slowly, my father reached for a pen. His hand was shaking so badly he had to steady it with his other hand. He did not look at me. He did not look at his son. He signed the papers. He pushed the envelope across the table. "Done," he whispered. Preston signed next, wiping tears from his face. Ashley signed last, her hand trembling as she realized her life of luxury was officially over. Lawyer James collected the papers. He checked the signatures. He nodded to me. I picked up the $20 bill. I put it back in my pocket. I turned to leave. "Jasmine!" my father called out. I stopped, but I did not turn around. "Why?" he asked, his voice broken. "Why did he give it to you? Why didn't he trust me?" I stood there for a moment looking at the heavy oak doors. "Because, Dad," I said softly, "Grandpa knew that if you had $20, you would try to turn it into 20 million by cheating. But he knew that if I had $20, I would use it to buy a future." I walked out of the room. The bodyguards followed me, closing the doors on the sobbing ruins of my family. I walked out into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. It tasted like rain and freedom. I had one last stop to make. Tomorrow, the world would know the truth. But tonight, I had to say goodbye to the past. The annual shareholder meeting of Vance Industries was usually a boring affair held in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton. Men in gray suits would clap politely at graphs showing 3% growth and eat rubbery chicken. But today was different. Today, there were no graphs. There were satellite trucks from CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC parked outside. There were hundreds of reporters shouting questions. And inside, the atmosphere was not one of celebration, but of a public execution. My father, Reginald Vance, stood at the podium. He was wearing his best suit and a layer of makeup so thick it looked like a mask trying to hide the gray pallor of his skin. He was sweating under the hot studio lights. He gripped the sides of the lectern as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He was fighting for his life, and he had decided that the only way to survive was to destroy me completely. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reginald began, his voice booming through the speakers, "the rumors you have heard over the last 24 hours are distressing. They are false. But they come from a place of deep tragedy. My daughter, Jasmine Vance, has suffered a psychotic break. The death of her grandfather pushed her over the edge. The documents released to the press are forgeries created by a confused and sick mind. We are currently seeking a court order to have her institutionalized for her own safety." A murmur went through the crowd. I watched from the wings of the stage hidden in the shadows. He was good. I had to give him that. He looked like a heartbroken father. Therefore, Reginald continued gaining confidence. "I am asking the shareholders to vote immediately to suspend the bylaws and grant me emergency dictatorial powers to protect the company from this internal attack. We must secure our assets from my daughter's madness." I signaled to Director Sterling, who was standing beside me. "It is time," I said. I did not run onto the stage. I walked. I walked slowly and deliberately, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. The sound was amplified by the acoustics of the room. Reginald stopped speaking. He looked to his left. He saw me. His eyes went wide with panic. "Security!" he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Remove her! She is dangerous!" 2 guards stepped forward, but before they could touch me, Director Sterling stepped into the light, holding up a single piece of paper. "Stand down," Sterling commanded. "Anyone who touches the trustee will be charged with assault on a federal witness." The guards froze. They looked at Reginald, then at the powerful banker. They stepped back. I walked up to the podium. My father tried to block me, but he was trembling so hard he could barely stand. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had called me a disappointment my entire life. "You are in my seat, Dad," I whispered. Reginald stumbled back, forgetting his microphone was on. "You cannot be here. You signed the deal. You said you wouldn't come if I signed." I leaned into the microphone. My voice was calm, steady, and amplified to millions of people watching around the world. I lied. The crowd gasped. I turned to the shareholders. "I am Jasmine Vance. I am not sick. I am not confused, and I am not powerless." As the camera zoomed in. "This company was built on integrity," I said. "But for the last 10 years, it has been run on greed. The motion for emergency powers is denied." I turned to look directly at my father and my brother Preston, who was cowering in the front row next to Ashley. "Furthermore," I continued, "acting in my capacity as chairwoman, I am hereby terminating the employment of Reginald Vance and Preston Vance effective immediately. Cause for termination is gross negligence, fraud, and theft of company property." "You cannot do this!" Reginald screamed, lunging for the microphone. "I am the CEO. I built this." The doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. A dozen agents and FBI windbreakers marched into the room. They were not smiling. They moved with the terrifying efficiency of a government that has all the evidence it needs. "Reginald Vance," the lead agent shouted, "you are under arrest for securities fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering." He looked at the cameras. He looked at me. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't happening." The agents swarmed the stage. They grabbed my father's arms and pulled them behind his back. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent ballroom. It was the sound of a dynasty ending. In the front row, Preston tried to run. He scrambled over the chairs, knocking down an elderly shareholder. He tried to hide behind Ashley, pulling her skirt to cover himself like a frightened child. "Do not let them take me," he sobbed. "Ashley, do something." Ashley kicked him away, her face twisted in disgust. "Get off me, you loser!" The agents grabbed Preston. He went limp, weeping openly, begging for his father to help him. But his father was already being marched down the center aisle, his head bowed, his legacy in ruins. I stood at the podium alone. The flashbulbs were blinding. The noise was deafening. But I felt a strange calm. I looked at the empty seat where my father had. I walked off the stage, leaving the chaos behind me. I did not give interviews. I did not smile for the cameras. I had one last loose end to tie up. The snake had been cut off at the head, but there was still one person who thought she could walk away with a consolation prize. Ashley. An hour later, I arrived at the Vance estate. The police tape was already up. The yellow plastic fluttered in the evening breeze, wrapping around the marble columns like a warning label. The assets were frozen pending the investigation. Nothing was supposed to leave the house. But I knew Ashley. She did not care about laws. She cared about survival. And in her mind, survival meant diamonds. I walked into the foyer. The house was silent except for the sound of frantic movement coming from the master bedroom upstairs. I walked up the grand staircase. My footsteps were soft on the carpet. I found Ashley in her dressing room. She had a Louis Vuitton duffel bag open on the bed. She was sweeping jewelry into it by the handful. Necklaces, rings, bracelets. She was moving with the manic energy of a looting thief. Going somewhere? Ashley, I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Ashley screamed and spun around, dropping a diamond tiara. She clutched the bag to her chest, breathing hard. "Jasmine," she hissed, "you startled me. I was just packing my personal items. The police said I could take essentials." I looked at the bag overflowing with glittering stones. "Since when are tiaras essential, Ashley?" "These are mine," she snapped, her eyes darting around the room looking for an exit. "Your grandfather left them to me. It was in the will. The Eleanor collection. $5 million worth of diamonds. They are my property and I am taking them. I need to sell them to pay for a lawyer and for a divorce." She zipped the bag shut. "Move out of my way, Jasmine. You took the company, you took the house, you took my husband. You are not taking these." I didn't move. I just watched her, clutching that bag like it was a life preserver on the Titanic. "You really do not know, do you?" I asked quietly. "Know what?" Ashley spat, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. I walked into the room. I picked up the tiara she had dropped. It sparkled beautifully under the chandelier lights. It looked heavy. It looked expensive. "Grandpa Elijah was a smart man," I said, turning the tiara over in my hands. "He knew about your shopping addiction, Ashley. He knew you only married Preston for the money. And he knew that eventually you would try to sell everything not bolted down." "So," Ashley asked, taking a step back, "what is your point?" "My point," I said, looking her in the eye, "is that Grandpa sold the real Eleanor collection 5 years ago. He sold it to a private collector in Dubai to fund the initial deposit for the Shadow Trust. He used the money to protect the company from you." Ashley's face went pale. "That is a lie. These are real." I tossed the tiara to her. She caught it, fumbling. "Catch," I said. It felt light, didn't it? Too light for platinum and diamonds. Ashley looked down at the crown in her hands. She ran her thumb over the stones. "These are high-quality cubic zirconia set in silver," I explained. "Costume jewelry. Very expensive costume jewelry. Probably worth a few $1,000s for the whole set, but certainly not 5 million. You have been parading around town for 5 years wearing glass, Ashley, and you never even noticed because you do not know quality. You only know price tags." "No," Ashley whispered. "No, that is impossible." She ripped the bag open. She pulled out a heavy necklace. She ran to the mirror and scratched the stone against the glass. Real diamonds scratch glass. The stone slid across the mirror, leaving no mark. It just made a screeching sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. Ashley let out a wail that sounded like a wounded animal. She fell to her knees, sifting through the pile of fake jewels. "It is all glass," she sobbed, picking up ring after ring. "It is all fake, just like me." The sound of sirens grew louder outside. Blue and red lights flashed through the bedroom window, illuminating Ashley on the floor, surrounded by her worthless treasure. I walked to the window and looked down. 2 police cruisers had pulled up. "I warned you not to steal sealed assets," I said. "Attempting to remove property from a crime scene is a felony, Ashley, even if that property is just glass." Ashley looked up at me, mascara streaming down her face. Please, Jasmine, don't let them take me. I have nothing. Preston is gone. The money is gone. This was all I had. I looked at her. I remembered how she had thrown my books into the trash. I remembered how I turned and walked out of the room as the police officers ran up the stairs. Please, Jasmine, she screamed after me. We are family. I paused at the top of the stairs. No, Ashley, I said without looking back. You were never family. You were just a bad investment. I walked out of the mansion into the cool night air. The nightmare was over. The house was empty. The villains were in chains. And in my pocket, the $20 bill felt lighter than ever. It was time to start rebuilding. Not a dynasty of greed, but a legacy of truth. And I knew exactly where to start. 6 months had passed since the FBI raided the ballroom, and the name Vance became synonymous with the biggest corporate scandal in Chicago history. The winter snow had melted, revealing the grime underneath. The contract on the table was thick. It was a sale agreement. I wasn't trying to save Vance Industries. The rot went too deep. My father and brother had hollowed it out so thoroughly that there was nothing left to save but the debt. So I did the only responsible thing. I sold it. I sold the factories. I sold the office towers. I sold the patent portfolio. I sold it all for a fraction of what my father claimed it was worth, but enough to cover the one thing that mattered: the people. The proceeds from the sale went directly into a prioritized escrow account. Every cent of the stolen pension fund was restored. Every vendor who had been stiffed by my brother was paid in full, and every employee received a severance package that would keep them safe while they found new jobs. When I signed the final document, the CEO of Harrington looked at me with respect. You could have kept the brand, Jasmine. You could have rebranded and kept the profits. I shook my head. The brand is poison. I do not want the name. I only want the peace. I kept only one thing, the charitable foundation, but I stripped my father's name off the building. It was no longer the Reginald Vance Center. It was now simply the Legacy Foundation. After the meeting, I drove my new car, not a flashy Lamborghini like Preston used to drive, but a reliable Volvo, to a small grocery store on the outskirts of the city. I pulled my hat down low. I wasn't there to shop. I was there to watch. In aisle 4, scanning a carton of milk and a bag of frozen peas, was a woman with graying hair and a tired face. She wore a green vest that was 2 sizes too big. It was my mother, Vivian. The court had seized everything: the mansion, the jewelry, even the clothes. My mother, who had once thrown a tantrum because a waiter brought her tap water instead of sparkling, was now asking customers if they wanted paper or plastic. I stood by the magazine rack watching her. I waited to feel guilt. I waited to feel that old urge to rush in and save her, to sign a check and fix her problems. But the urge didn't come, because I remembered the dinner. I remembered her trying to bribe me with a worthless check while my father signed a mortgage he couldn't pay. She looked up, and for a second our eyes met across the store. She froze, holding a scan gun. I saw anger in her eyes. I saw blame. She still believed this was my fault. She still believed I had ruined her life rather than saving her from being an accessory to a felony. I didn't wave. I didn't approach her. I just turned and walked out. She had her life, and I had mine. My final stop was a place I had dreaded for weeks, the State Correctional Center. The sound of the heavy steel doors slamming shut behind me echoed in my bones. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. I sat in the visitation room, separated from the prisoner. Reginald Vance had aged 20 years in 6 months. His hair was white and thinning. His skin was sallow. The arrogant posture was gone, replaced by the shuffle of a man who had lost all agency. He sat down and picked up the phone. He didn't say hello. "Are you happy now?" He rasped, his voice dry and bitter. "Are you happy seeing your father in a cage?" I looked at him calmly. "I am not happy, Dad. But I am at peace. And I hope you are too. You do not have to lie anymore. You do not have to pretend to be a billionaire." He slammed his fist against the glass, weak and ineffectual. "I was a billionaire. I built an empire. And you sold it. I heard what you did. You sold it to Harrington. You gave away my legacy to my enemy. I sold it to pay back the people you stole from," I corrected him. "I cleared the debts. The books are balanced, Dad. For the first time in 20 years, the Vance... Now you are just a teacher with a trust fund." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a single object. "I asked the warden if I could leave you a gift," I said. He said it was allowed as long as it wasn't contraband. I slid the bag through the small slot at the bottom of the window. Reginald picked it up. He looked at it. His eyes went wide. It was the $20 bill, the same crumpled, dirty bill with the serial number E1990 Legacy. "What is this?" he whispered. I leaned into the microphone. "That is for the commissary, Dad. You can buy some snacks, maybe some chocolate, or a notepad to write your memoirs." He stared at the bill, his hands shaking. "You are mocking me." "No," I said, standing up. "I am giving you exactly what you gave me." I looked at him one last time. The man who had terrified me. "That is your inheritance, Dad," I said softly. "Don't spend it all in one place." I hung up the phone. I turned my back on his shouting. I signaled the guard. As I walked out of the prison through the series of locking gates, I took a deep breath. The air outside was cold and crisp. It tasted like winter, but it felt like spring. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just drove forward. The lake house was exactly as I remembered it. It was a small cabin nestled among tall pines overlooking a body of water that reflected the sky like a mirror. It was the only property I had bought back from the liquidation using my own money. This wasn't corporate assets. This was home. I sat on the wooden dock, my legs dangling over the edge, just inches above the water. Beside me was a fishing rod, the old bamboo one Grandpa Elijah had taught me to use. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the trees. I had set up a camera on a tripod behind me. The red light was blinking, recording the final entry in my video diary. "Hello, everyone," I said, addressing the lens, but really addressing the millions of people who had followed my story. "I am Jasmine Vance. It has been 6 months since the storm broke. A lot of you have asked me what happened to the money, the billions that were on paper. The answer is simple. It never really existed. It was an illusion built on debt and lies. I picked up a stone and skipped it across the water. 1, 2, 3 skips. But out of the wreckage, we built something real. Today, I am officially launching the $20 Scholarship Fund. I smiled at the camera. This isn't a scholarship for the students with the perfect grades or the rich parents. This is a scholarship for the black sheep, for the kids who sit in the back of the class, for the ones who have been told they are disappointments, for the ones who have been kicked out, pushed down, and underestimated. I held up my hand, showing the empty space where I used to hold the bill. My grandfather taught me that value isn't printed on paper. It is printed on your character. My father had billions, and he ended up with nothing. I had $20, and I ended up with everything. I looked out at the lake, feeling the presence of my grandfather in the wind rustling the trees. Money cannot buy class. It cannot buy loyalty, and it certainly cannot buy a legacy. A legacy is what you leave behind in the hearts of the people you help, not the bank accounts you fill. I reached for the fishing rod and cast the line into the water. The lure hit the surface with a gentle splash, creating ripples that expanded outward, touching everything in their path. So to anyone watching this who feels small, who feels poor, who feels like they do not belong, remember this. You are worth more than the number. You are the architect of your own future. I turned back to the camera one last time. My name is Jasmine. I am a teacher. I am a survivor. And I am finally free. Thank you for watching. I let the camera run for a few more seconds, capturing the peace of the moment, the sound of the birds and the gentle lapping of the water against the dock. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the world into a silhouette of peace. The screen faded to black, and in the center, in simple white text, 3 words appeared. The true legacy. My grandfather left me with a $20 bill, but the real gift was the realization that true worth is internal. My father and brother had billions, yet they were spiritually penniless. I learned that you cannot buy class, integrity, or peace. When the world tries to define you by your possessions, remember that standing up to toxic family is terrifying, but breaking free is the only way to build a life that is authentically yours. A legacy isn't what you own, it's who you are. If you believe in choosing truth over greed, hit like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what is the most valuable lesson you have learned the hard way?